So today we're continuing our series on the 8 laws of health. And of course they come from the Ministry of Healing, page 127, pure air, sunlight, abstemiousness, rest, exercise, proper diet, the use of water, trust in divine power. These are the true remedies. Now help me out on the screen. So far we have covered N, which stands for what? Nutrition. E stands for W, water, and S, sunlight or sunshine. T is temperance, A is air, R is rest, and T is trust in divine power. We are moving right along in the series. In fact, we are done with new, and we're moving into start. S stands for sunlight. Did you know that there is a disease called SAD? Seasonal affective disorder. I'm serious. SAD, seasonal affective disorder. What is it? According to the Mayo Clinic, seasonal affective disorder, also called SAD, is a type of depression that occurs at the same time every year. If you're like most people with seasonal affective disorder, your symptoms start in the fall and may continue into the winter months, sapping your energy and making you feel moody. Most of the time, seasonal affective disorder, these symptoms appear and then they go away. That's how you know it is that and not just general depression. Here are some of the symptoms of SAD: depression, hopelessness, anxiety, loss of energy, social withdrawal, oversleeping, loss of interest in activities you were once engaged in and enjoyed, appetite changes, weight gain, and difficulty concentrating. So if you have trouble concentrating on the message today, maybe you are suffering from seasonal affective disorder. What's fascinating is that it is more common in places where sunlight is reduced during winter months. SAD is measurably present in northern latitudes. Its prevalence in the United States ranges from 1.4% in Florida to 9.7% in New Hampshire. SAD seems to be more prominent where cloud cover blocks light from the sun. What is the treatment for SAD? One of the most prominent treatments is light therapy. So maybe the solution for SAD Christians is light therapy. Just as the sun in the sky brings light and life to our planet, Jesus, the Son of Righteousness, brings light and life to sad, cold hearts. Every living thing in our world is dependent on the sun. Without the sun, nothing could survive. Sunlight. The sun has been getting a bad rap lately. From the pagan Christian Sunday to skin cancer, we've been awful hard on the sun. We've been warned about the sun. Many ancient cultures worship the sun. All Adventists know that. From the Babylonians to the Egyptians to the Roman Sunday, and there isn't any shortage of medical advice telling people to stay out of the sun. If you have to go out, you'd better lather on the sunscreen, is the consensus. Why these warnings? Sunburn, wrinkles, cancer, melanoma, eye damage, harmful ultraviolet rays. It is frightening. According to the EPA, the ozone layer is depleting, and this decreases our atmosphere's natural protection from the sun's harmful UV radiation. The EPA says 1 in 5 Americans will develop skin cancer in their lifetime. 1 American dies from skin cancer every hour. Unprotected exposure to UV radiation is the most preventable risk factor for skin cancer. Melanoma, the most serious form of skin cancer, is now one of the most common cancers among adolescents and young adults ages 15 to 29. While melanoma accounts for about 3% of skin cancer cases, it causes more than 75% of skin cancer deaths. Frightening, isn't it? If that wasn't enough, research has shown that UV radiation increases the likelihood of certain cataracts. Although curable with modern eye surgery, cataracts diminish the eyesight of millions of Americans and cost billions of dollars in medical care each year. Well, that's almost enough to convince one to turn into a night owl. Tint your windows, let down the drapes, sleep during the day, get a night job. But is this really the case? As you are aware, sometimes there's another side to the story. Sometimes there's another side to the debate, and it turns out that is true in the sunlight debate. There's so many studies on the subjects, sometimes it's hard to know what to believe, and people will pick and choose what side they want to believe. There is another side to this coin, and I think we need to be seekers of truth and find out the truth of the matter. While the scientific community notes the harmful effects of too much sun, there are others who note the harmful effects of not enough sun. There are also others who note the harmful effects that many sunscreens cause. Some studies suggest that sunscreen may be to blame for the increased rate of many skin cancers. I want to suggest to you today that getting out in the sun is not as dangerous as some may make it sound. To the contrary, it can be extremely beneficial. Of course, I'm not suggesting that you peel off all your clothes and head to the beach and get roasted and toasted until you're well done. It's not what I'm suggesting. But I am suggesting that the right amounts of sunlight directly on the skin has amazing benefits. And in fact, one of my church members actually sent me some research on that has been done by Wes Youngberg, Dr. Wes Youngberg, on the subject of sunlight. Many of you are aware of who he is. And it has been documented that sunlight kills bacteria, protects against pneumonia, fights tuberculosis, synchronizes the hormones, prevents certain cancers, prevents multiple sclerosis, fights binge eating, drives away depression, lowers the risk of bone fractures, increases agility, strengthens the muscles, builds the immune system. Sunlight can bring powerful healing. Now, I understand. We've heard media blitz after media blitz of how bad sunlight is for you. Well, I'm here today to counteract some of that negative propaganda. You see, we need to learn to reason from cause to effect. We need to recognize that getting proper sunlight might be something that many are missing. Now, there's no silver bullet. It's not the one law of health. It is the 8 laws of health. But when the 8 laws of health are practiced together, and you're not missing any of them, and you're getting proper exercise and nutrition, you're getting exercise and plenty of water, when you put all these things together, that's when amazing health comes together. And I wonder if we're properly taking care to include this amazing thing called sunlight in our health. It's free. Getting enough sunlight has an impact of how much natural vitamin D a person gets. It has an impact on your weight, and it has an impact on your health and mental well-being, whether you feel down and depressed. Getting proper sunlight increases vitamin D just below your skin, which is absorbed by your body. The ultraviolet rays that are so harmful, those UV rays, actually turn cholesterol right below your skin into vitamin D for your body to absorb. Studies indicate that the vast majority of people, even in the United States today, are low in vitamin D. In fact, you can talk to quite a few doctors. Dr. Neil Nedley would suggest the same thing. It's pretty simple. God made us to work out in the sun. God made us to get exercise and fresh air and get a proper diet from our fruit trees and our gardens that we grow. Instead, we're cooped up in houses and office complexes or working in Home Depot or Walmart, and we're not getting enough sun. Now, what's the big deal? Is vitamin D really that important? According to good research, it is vitally important. In fact, there was one study done. It was reported on all the major news networks toward the beginning of the COVID outbreak, was that all of those, pretty much every single person who was dying or getting really, really sick from COVID was also low in vitamin D. Now, it's not a silver bullet, but that was just a general thing that was on ABC News. I remember back at the time, and so those who are not getting, I'm not a doctor, but those who are not getting out in the sun ought to maybe take a blood test and find out if they are low in vitamin D. And if you are, work to rectify that, because when you're low in vitamin D, you are at risk, much greater risk, for getting many diseases and many cancers. For example, one study showed that teenagers who were low in vitamin D were over 2 times more likely to have high blood pressure than those who had adequate vitamin D. Those teens who didn't have enough vitamin D were 2.5 times more likely to be at risk for prediabetes and high blood sugar. And for those who are aging, the risk of a heart attack and stroke is 4 times greater if you have a low level of vitamin D. It could be that most of us here, especially in Michigan, middle of winter, are low in vitamin D. In fact, I did have my blood work done, and I discovered that I could use more vitamin D. So I worked to rectify that, and it could be coincidental, but since I had that blood work and since I have been taking vitamin D, my immune system has been working way better than it used to be. Those who knew me before could tell you that I would get every single cold that would come along. I've had very few lately. Maybe it's the pure Michigan air, or maybe the house that I live in doesn't have mold like a previous place I lived might have. I don't know. But maybe it's because I'm getting more vitamin D. Moving on from vitamin D, Dr. Neil Nedley has done some incredible research in his book, Depression: The Way Out. Now, one lifestyle treatment for depression is actually light therapy. I quote Dr. Nedley now. Bright light, such as sunlight, increases serotonin production in the daytime, which in turn can treat depression and fatigue. Bright light exposure may also increase blood melatonin levels at night, which can create more restful and efficient sleep. Now, if you want to know what melatonin and serotonin are, well, you'll have to read the book by Dr. Nedley, which I recommend, by the way. Maybe I should tell you what they are. Serotonin is an important neurotransmitter in the brain, according to the book on page 66. You want your brain to work better, think better, get sunlight. Now, melatonin is a natural hormone produced by the body and found in certain foods. Melatonin helps with insomnia, quickens healing, increases longevity, enhances the immune system, helps a person cope with stress and maintain a positive outlook. Bright light exposure to the sun increases natural melatonin production. This verifies what Ellen White said over a century ago. She said, invalids too often deprive themselves of sunlight. This is one of nature's most healing agents. It is a very simple, therefore not fashionable remedy to enjoy the rays of God's sunlight and beautify our homes with its presence. According to Dr. Nedley, melatonin increases longevity by slowing down the aging process. As a person ages, melatonin production slows along with that aging process. We conclude that to slow down the aging process, we can boost our melatonin production by being exposed to more sunlight, which helps to offset the natural weakening of melatonin production. Ellen White understood the need for people to get plenty of sunlight, especially as they get older. She said, vigor declines as years advance, leaving less vitality with which to resist unhealthful influences. Hence, the greater necessity for the aged to have plenty of sunlight and fresh, pure air. So as you age, you need more sunlight. Maybe that's why some of our members feel the need to go to Florida or Arizona in the winter. Also, our bodies have an internal biological clock that governs our circadian rhythm. This clock synchronizes by the daily light-dark cycle in our Earth. Dr. Nedley states, bright light therapy can also restore the normal daily body rhythm called circadian rhythm. If a person has problems with early morning awakening, 3 to 5 a.m., but needs more sleep, exposure to bright light in the early morning for 30 minutes can restore the normal sleep pattern. For the more common problem of not being able to fall asleep at bedtime, insomnia, combined with awakening too late in the morning, exposure to early morning bright light, 6 to 8 a.m., can restore the normal sleep cycle. Every morning, when you get outside in the early morning sunlight, you are resyncing your body clock. I'm not making this up. There is a field of study, a legitimate field of study called chronobiology. What is it? Well, here it is. Chronobiology is the biology of time, or the study of internal biological clocks. Biological clocks are found at all levels in living organisms. They range from oscillations found in nerve cells on the millisecond scale to oscillations in minutes, hours, days, and years in a variety of organisms and tissues. There is evidence that these internal clocks have some kind of relation to solar and even lunar rhythms. One of the most wonderful gifts that we have available to us is to enjoy early morning light outdoors. It can change you psychologically, and it can also change you physiologically. Sunlight can help control weight. Dr. Wes Youngbird showed studies indicating this. For example, a group of animals were given the exact same calorie intake. Half the group were exposed to early morning sunlight, the other half were not. The half that were exposed to sunlight lost weight. Now, that's not saying that calorie intake's not important. It just demonstrates that there are other variables as well. There are 8 laws of health, not 1. Another study showed that obese women exposed to sunlight for 45 minutes between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. began losing weight after 3 weeks. Sunlight is amazing. It provides us with vitamin D. It cures depression, produces melatonin. Hence, it slows down the aging process and helps us sleep better and live better. Sunlight is also a powerful disinfectant. It kills bacteria. When you hang clothes, underwear, cloth diapers, tea towels, sheets, blankets, whatever it is, out in the sun, the UV rays from the sun deactivate or destroy the microorganisms such as viruses and bacteria. Do any of you remember your mothers who would hang the laundry outside and they would bring it in and it would smell so fresh when you would bring it in from the clothesline? Absolutely. The sun and the fresh air killed those viruses and bacteria. Placing things in the sun has been shown to quite effectively disinfect them. In 1935, Dr. Darrell Hart noted the frequency with which infections developed in people who had just had operations. He wondered whether airborne germs might have contaminated them while the operation was in progress. So here's what he did. He placed an open petri dish in an operating room for an hour during an operation, and he found 78 colonies of Staphylococcus on one plate alone. 78 colonies. Was there any way in which these germs in the air could have been prevented, could have been killed? What he did is he placed ultraviolet lights overhead and discovered that all the germs, including the very dangerous ones, were killed within 10 minutes if they were within 8 feet of those lamps. And this happened even when the lights were turned down to a low enough intensity that it required 80 minutes for blonde skin to be reddened. Now, I'm not suggesting that you go get sun lamps or ultraviolet lights and set them up in your house. That's not what I'm suggesting. What I'm demonstrating is the power of UV rays to kill harmful bacteria. You could cause other damage if you set up UV lamps in your house. It might hurt your eyes, and if these things are not used with the greatest care. But here's what you should do. You should open your windows. You should pull back your curtains. You should let the sun shine in. Over a century ago, Ellen White noted the benefits of sunlight in the building of houses. It is especially important to secure thorough ventilation and plenty of sunlight. Let there be a current of air and an abundance of light in every room in the house. This is from Health4 Living, page 229. If you would have your home sweet and inviting, make them bright with air and sunshine. Remove your heavy curtains, open the windows, throw back the blinds, and enjoy the rich sunlight, even if it be at the expense of the colors of your carpets. That's some very good advice. Now, how much sunlight should a person get? Some people work outdoors all day. They've worked up to it. It's probably best to start exposing your face and body to the sun for no more than a few minutes to start, if you haven't been used to it. Then you can slowly work your way up without getting a sunburn all the way to 30 to 45 minutes. Now, every year, I never remember this, and I always work in the garden, and I forget my hat, and I at least get one big sunburn every year. It's not good to get sunburn. Try to avoid sunburn if you can. Now you say, what about all the warnings? What about all the warnings? Will I get wrinkles? Will I get skin cancer and cataracts? Is the treatment worse than the cure? So I feel better, but 10 years down the road, I get melanoma. Well, Dr. Wes Youngberg suggests that the actual hard research on the subject doesn't suggest that sunlight is as bad as we might think. Actually, the studies show that sunshine actually protects against lymphoma and melanoma and other cancers. In fact, the National Cancer Institute reports that sun exposure is linked to better survival in patients with melanoma cancer. Now, I'm aware that this flies in the face of much probably well-meaning recommendations, but could it be today that the very thing that we are avoiding is decreasing our capacity to be well? Did you know that not all melanoma is sun-related? In fact, there are diet-related melanomas. Dr. Youngberg believes that much of skin cancer is diet-induced. Consider this real-life scenario. Real-life scenario. My wife's uncle worked in a slaughterhouse. You know what his job was? To cut off cancer on carcasses as they came by. That was his job. Now, if a carcass would come by with melanoma, they'd take the whole cow off the line and incinerate it, right? No, they wouldn't. At best, a gouge is made around the area, and the carcass keeps moving on down the line. Do you think that took care of most of the melanoma? No. Melanoma is systemic. It's all through the carcass. What happens when a person consumes that in processed meat? We don't know for sure, but we do know that sometimes diseases from what you eat can be transferred to our bodies. And what about the sun-related cases of melanoma? Dr. Zane Kim, who received his medical degree from Loma Linda University, in his book Sunlight, wrote this: nutrition and sunlight are intimately related. By striking the skin, sunlight can produce certain hormones and nutrients like vitamin D. Unless one has a proper diet, sunlight has an ill effect on the skin. This must be emphasized. Sunbathing is dangerous for those who are in the standard, high-fat American diet, or do not get an abundance of vegetables, whole grains, and fresh fruits. Those on the standard, high-fat diet should stay out of the sun and protect themselves from it. But at the same time, they will suffer the consequences of both the high-fat diet and the deficiency of sunlight. What about wrinkles? Is sunlight really the greatest cause of wrinkles? We frequently hear warnings about wrinkles and skin cancer in the same breath. While the sun may cause wrinkles, in reality, there are many other factors that cause wrinkles. Consider, for instance, we talked about this before, that if you're not drinking enough water, that can cause wrinkles. Lack of hydration can cause wrinkles. Consider, for instance, that smoking is the greatest cause of wrinkles. Also consider that our skin is built from the inside out and often reflects our diet habits. It's been shown that those who started drinking more water produced smoother skin. We talked about that before. Dr. Zane Kim had this to say about wrinkles in the sun. This is page 89 from his book. If too much sunlight is received, it can have a drying effect, and one may occasionally have flaking, dry skin. Exposure to the sun should be progressive, beginning with only a few minutes a day. If the tissues of the skin are saturated with the necessary vitamins, the sun will not age the skin, but enhance its beauty. So before you put 100% of the blame on the sun for your wrinkles, maybe you ought to look at some of the other aspects of your life, your diet, your water intake. And don't forget that wrinkles are a part of aging. And we are aging in this sinful world that we live. Now, please remember, moderation is important. I'm not recommending that anybody strip off all their clothes and start roasting themselves in the noonday sun until they're crisp and well done. Like with many other things, moderation is important. Remember, all the laws of health need to be practiced together. As Dr. Kim said, those on the standard high-fat diet should stay out of the sun and protect themselves from it. But at the same time, they will suffer the consequences of both the high-fat diet and the deficiency of sunlight. So clean up your diet and enjoy the sunshine. You may be at risk for cancer if you load up on fatty foods, take a Coke and Cheetos and a pack of cigarettes, and head to the beach. Leaving the beach, what does the Bible say about the sun? The sun in the Bible is often used as an element to mark time. Consider Genesis chapter 1. Let's actually go there. Genesis chapter 1, verses 14 through 18. In the Bible, we see that the sun and the moon were given to mark time. Genesis 1, beginning in verse 14, then God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night. Let them be for signs and for seasons, for days and for years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heavens to give light on the earth. And it was so. Then God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. God set them in the firmament of the heavens to give light on the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. So you notice, the sun, the moon, and the stars were not only created to provide light, but they had an element of time, an element of chronology. Isn't it interesting that the early morning sunlight resets our body clocks as well? Now in the Bible, when does the new day begin? At sunset. Not a trick question. A new day begins at sundown in the Bible, and that's why we Sabbath keepers celebrate the Sabbath from Friday evening to Sabbath evening. So when the Bible talks about the sun, it can be used as an element to mark time. A new day begins at sundown. Now, if you recall the days of Joshua, the sun stood still. Remember that? There was an experience where these Gibeonites came to Joshua one day. They had worn out clothes and sandals with holes in them, moldy bread, and they said, oh, we've come from a far country. Please make peace with us. And you remember Joshua made a treaty with the Gibeonites? Well, what happened, not very many days later, the Gibeonites went back home. They didn't live that far away. It was all a guise. And the other nations round about heard that the Gibeonites had made a treaty with Israel. So what did those other nations do on all those kings, the 5 kings? They came to attack the Gibeonites, and they surrounded them. Now the Gibeonites, guess what they did? They sent a notice to Israel saying, hey, you made a treaty with us. Will you help us? Will you deliver us? And of course, Israel did. 5 kings against Israel. And the armies of Israel marched all night. They arrived just in time. They surprised the 5 kings. They scattered them in all different directions. It was a long battle. The Lord worked miraculously. He worked powerfully that day. He sent hailstones from the sky to help Israel. But as the pursuit continued toward evening, Joshua saw that many would escape into the darkness. Suddenly, he looked toward the setting sun, and he cried out, O sun, stand thou still over Gibeon, and moon in the valley of Ajalon. And it happened. I don't know how it happened, but the Bible says the sun stood still in the midst of heaven and did not hasten to go down for about a whole day. But the sun eventually set. The battle was eventually over. Although God's grace extended the day, night eventually settled on the hills. This earth's history has been a battle between good and evil. From the day the sun rose over the earth for the first time, Satan has been trying to capture as many souls as he can. Since the sunrise of this planet, there's been a war raging. The battle has been fierce. The day has been long. But one day the sun will set for planet Earth. And my friends, let me tell you this morning, it should have set a long time ago. It should have set a long time ago, but God's grace has extended the day. A voice cried out in the middle of the battle as the sun was getting low, "Sun, stand still. Give them a little more time. There's so much work to do." Oh, friend, the sun should have set a long time ago. But the Bible says the Lord is not slack concerning his promise, as some count slackness, but is long-suffering toward us, not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. The sun still shines so that you can be saved. The sun still shines so that you can work for the salvation of others. The sun still shines because the Lord's soldiers have more territory to conquer. The sun still shines, but it's getting late. It's getting low in the sky. We're already living in the extended day of grace. The sun is about to set, and there'll be no voice to stop it. It will set, and darkness will descend over the earth. The decree will go forth. He who is unjust, let him be unjust still. He who is filthy, let him be filthy still. He who is righteous, let him be righteous still. He who is holy, let him be holy still. Work, for the night is coming. Work while the sun and the light and the moon and the stars are not darkened. Work, for the night is coming under the sunset skies. While their bright tints are glowing, work, for daylight flies. Work, till the last beam fadeth to shine no more. Work, for the Lord is coming, when man's work is o'er. Amen.